This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. Wilbur Ross, the 81-year-old near-billionaire and freakish human facsimile of Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, currently serves as Donald Trump's Secretary of Commerce. He is making headlines for his comments during an interview with CNBC yesterday related to the dire crisis facing many government workers as a result of the Trump government shutdown. We are a full 35 days into this nightmare, so you've for sure seen that the Coast Guard cannot guarantee death benefits to families in the event that their brave and loyal loved ones are killed in the line of duty. Employees of the TSA, many of whom only make 25 or 30 grand a year, can't afford to even put gas in their cars to get to work where they're not being paid, to keep us safe while we fly. As a result, no-shows in the TSA have peaked at 10%. And Air Traffic Controllers Union announced that its grave concerns that they have for safety are very real. Chef Jose Andres, who swooped in to the rescue after Donald Trump dropped the balls in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria and in Tijuana as a result of Donald Trump's manufactured border crisis, is once again picking up where Donald Trump's government fails and is using his World Central Kitchen organization to feed furloughed federal employees in Washington, D.C., and is now expanding nationwide with hashtag Chefs for Feds. FDA inspections are down. National parks are being vandalized. But most notably, 800,000 federal workers have not been paid for over a month, putting stress and strain on their lives and ability to make ends meet. Enter the aforementioned real-life Mr. Burns with his out-of-control empathy for workers without paychecks.
But put it in perspective, you're talking about 800,000 workers, and while I feel sorry for the individuals that have hardship cases, 800,000 workers, if they never got their pay, which is not the case, they will eventually get it, but if they never got it, you're talking about 1/3% on our GDP. So it's not like it's a gigantic number overall.
Mr. Secretary, Mr. Secretary, there are reports that there are some federal workers who are going to homeless shelters to get food.
Well, I know they are, and I don't really quite understand why, because as I mentioned before, the obligations that they would undertake, say a borrowing from a bank or a credit union, are in effect federally guaranteed. So the 30 days of pay that some people will be out, there's no real reason why they shouldn't be able to get a loan against it. And we've seen a number of ads from financial institutions doing that.
That silence at the end there, those crickets, that's the interviewer, seeming rendered speechless by the sociopathic lack of empathy. The complete inability to even acknowledge the difficulties associated with 800,000 federal workers going without pay and working for free. This exchange is particularly remarkable because Secretary Crypt-Keeper over here has no vision of the actual human experience in all of this. He's instead focusing on the minimal impact on the nation's gross domestic product. I guess I'm wondering where this logic was when he wrote an op-ed last November praising the investments from the Department of Commerce into the coal industry. He wrote about Kentucky's grants, quote, which will create an estimated 2,300 jobs, saving another 2,200, unquote. Wait, how does someone tout fewer than 5,000 jobs and then just 2 months later dismiss almost 1 million? Not only that, but Wilbur Ross is confused about why government workers going without pay for over a month are going to homeless shelters and soup kitchens. My question is why we have someone in a position of power like this who is so out of touch with the lives of ordinary Americans that he appears to be unaware of the fact that 1 in 4 Americans would be unable to cover a $400 emergency without selling something or borrowing money. And of course, borrowing is what Wilbur Ross is asking them to do. Get a loan, he says.
And it's kind of disappointing that the air traffic controllers are calling in sick in pretty large numbers. Depending on the week.
Many of them can't afford to support their families, though.
Well, remember this, they are eventually going to be paid. The president signed that into law.
Mr. Secretary, but many of these people need, Mr. Secretary, many of these workers clearly need the paycheck on a week-by-week basis. They're not,
Sure.
frankly, in my shoes, nor in yours, nor in
Right.
yours. And
Well,
so the question is this battle and fight at this point in the ballgame worth it? Meaning, is the debate over everything else that the administration's fighting for worth more than the risk that's being taken on at this very moment and the effect that it's having on the families of these federal workers?
Well, first of all, the banks and the credit unions should be making credit available to them. When you think about it, these are basically government-guaranteed loans because the government has committed these folks will get their back pay once this whole thing gets settled down. So there really is not a good excuse why there really should be a liquidity crisis. Now, true, the people might have to pay a little bit of interest, but the idea that it's paycheck or zero is not a really valid idea.
Wow. Great advice from Wilbur Ross, the human droopy dog. Don't have money to pay your rent, or your car payment, or gas for your car, or diapers or formula for your newborn baby, or insulin or some other life-saving medication? Well, if you haven't already done inexorable damage to your credit by maxing out your credit cards you have, see if you can go ask to borrow even more money from a bank and then owe interest on it. Great idea, Wilbur. And what did Wilbur Ross's fellow almost billionaire pal and boss have to say when asked about all of this? Prepare yourself for unadulterated nonsense.
Mr. President, did you see Wilbur Ross said that he doesn't understand why federal workers would need help getting food? Can you understand?
No, I haven't heard the statement, but I do understand. Perhaps he should have said it differently. Local people know who they are when they go for groceries and everything else. And I think what Wilbur was probably trying to say is that they will work along. I know banks are working along. If you have mortgages, the mortgagees, the folks collecting the interest and all of those things, they work along. And that's what happens in time like this. They know the people, they've been dealing with them for years, and they work along. The grocery store, and I think that's probably what Wilbur Ross meant, but I haven't seen his statement, no, but he's done a great job.
And that's what happens in time like this. They know the people, they've been dealing with them for years, and they work along. The grocery store, I think that's probably what Wilbur Ross meant. What? So one, Donald Trump is making judgments and comments about a statement made by Wilbur that he claims to have not heard. Yeah, that's not how that works. And second, Donald Trump is such a pathetic, soft-headed, out-of-touch mook that he thinks federal workers should just go on down to the grocery store and pick up what they need for free because they know everybody. What is this, Little House on the Prairie? Let's add this to the list of reasons not to elect someone who's never shopped in a grocery store or had to create a budget for themselves because they only had limited resources. This government shutdown is hurting not just the government workers who are working without pay, but it's hurting the small businesses who rely on the money those government workers make to fund their restaurants and shops. It's hurting the 40 million people who live in vulnerable situations who rely on government assistance to buy food through the SNAP program. It's hurting people who rely on the federal housing assistance programs so they can avoid homelessness. It is likely to devastate the lives of countless Americans who work in government-adjacent sectors as contractors, who aren't going to get back pay. All of this is happening, and we know exactly why and who to blame. Because when all of this is said and done, and the dust has settled, I want every single one of us to have this moment seared into our brains going into 2020.
I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it.